Shy CEO signs a baby contract with a young woman and unlocks a love story he never expected. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready. Let's start. The 47th floor of the Langston Biotech building pierced through the November rain like a silver needle through grey silk. Inside his corner office, Everett Langston stood with his back to the Manhattan skyline, his reflection fragmenting across the rain-streaked windows. The city below was a blur of lights and shadows, much like the past 5 years of his life. "Mr. Langston," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ms. Thomas is here for the final contract review." Everett straightened his tie, a gesture more habitual than necessary. "Send her in." His voice carried none of the uncertainty churning in his stomach. The door opened, and Janelle Thomas stepped in. She wasn't what anyone would expect from a surrogate mother candidate, dressed in a sensible navy blazer and carrying a worn leather messenger bag. She looked more like a young professional than someone about to enter into one of the most intimate contracts possible between two strangers. "Please sit." Everett gestured to the chair across from his desk, noticing how she took in the room with quick, observant eyes. The grand piano in the corner, his one concession to personality in an otherwise stark office, caught her attention briefly. "You play?" she asked, settling into the chair. "When needed." He kept his answer clipped, professional. This wasn't a social call. The contract sitting between them was already 30 pages long, each clause carefully crafted to prevent the exact kind of casual conversation she seemed intent on starting. Janelle nodded, her dark curls brushing against her shoulders. "My mom used to say music was the best medicine for a troubled mind." She paused, something flickering across her face. Pain, perhaps, or memory. "But we're not here to discuss music, are we, Mr. Langston?" "No." Everett sat down, grateful for the return to business. "We're here to finalize the terms." He slid the contract across the polished desk surface. Everything we discussed is included. The medical procedures, the compensation, the confidentiality clauses, and," he hesitated for a fraction of a second, "the emotional boundaries." Janelle's fingers traced the edge of the paper, her nails neat but unpolished. "Would Section 7.3, she quoted without opening the document, "The surrogate agrees to maintain strictly professional interaction with the intended father throughout the duration of the pregnancy and thereafter." "I remember." Something in her tone made Everett look up sharply. "Is that going to be a problem?" "No." Her smile was small, but steady. "Professional is my middle name, Mr. Langston, though technically it's Marie." The attempt at humor should have annoyed him. Instead, he found himself studying her face, the warmth in her brown eyes, the subtle strength in her jaw. At 28, she was young, but there was something in her manner that spoke of old souls and weathered storms. "The compensation will be transferred in installments," he continued, forcing himself back to business. "The first payment will clear once the pregnancy is confirmed. Your medical insurance, living expenses, and all pregnancy-related costs will be covered separately." Janelle reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I have just one addition to request." She slid it across the desk. "A clause ensuring that my sister's college tuition will be covered through graduation, regardless of complications." Everett's fingers stilled over the paper. "Complications. Life happens, Mr. Langston." Her voice was quiet but firm. "I need to know my sister will be taken care of, even if something happens to me." The words hit him like a physical blow, bringing back memories he'd spent years burying. Another woman, another baby, another promise that had shattered like glass. He pushed the thought away, focusing on the present. "I'll have my lawyers add the clause." He stood up, needing suddenly to move, to think. The rain had intensified outside, drums against glass. "You understand what you're agreeing to. 9 months of your life, your body, carrying a child that will never be yours." Janelle stood as well, her height surprising him. She nearly reached his shoulder. "With all due respect, Mr. Langston, I think you're the one who needs to understand something." She met his gaze directly. "I'm not giving you 9 months of my life. I'm giving your child the first 9 months of theirs. There's a difference." The simplicity of her words, the quiet dignity behind them, caught him off guard. For a moment, he saw past the contract, past the professional facade, to the woman beneath. Someone who had known loss, who understood sacrifice, who carried her own weight of memories and dreams. "The final contract will be ready tomorrow," he managed, turning back to his desk. "And my assistant will schedule the signing." "Tomorrow, then?" Janelle gathered her bag, heading for the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. "Oh, and Mr. Langston, you might want to try Chopin's Nocturnes. They always help my mum on rainy nights." The door closed behind her before he could respond. Everett stood at his window, watching as she emerged from the building below, a small figure with an umbrella fighting against the wind. The city swallowed her quickly, just another story in its endless pages. He turned to the piano, his fingers itching suddenly for its keys, but he didn't play. Not yet. First, he had a contract to revise, a clause to add, and a strange, unsettling feeling to ignore. The feeling that despite all his careful planning, despite all the boundaries and clauses and professional distances, something unexpected had just begun. The rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the gathering darkness, Chopin's ghost waited patiently for midnight. The Brooklyn public school where Janelle worked looked like it had been built in another century, because it had been. Red brick walls rose 4 stories high, decorated with hopscotch chalk drawings and children's artwork taped to ground-floor windows. Inside her tiny administrative office, Janelle stared at her resignation letter, cursor blinking at the end of "Sincerely, Janelle M. Thomas." "You don't have to do this," said a voice from the doorway. Principal Regina Martinez leaned against the frame, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in its usual neat bun. "We can figure something out." "A leave of absence?" "Maybe." Janelle shook her head, touching the small pendant at her throat, her mother's last Christmas gift. "You know I can't explain a 9-month leave without lying, and I won't lie to you, Regina, not after everything you've done for me." Regina crossed the small office, perching on the edge of Janelle's desk. "Your mother would be worried sick about this contract business. My mother would understand doing whatever it takes to protect family." Janelle's fingers moved to the stack of medical bills hidden in her bottom drawer. Even after selling the house, after draining every savings account, after the insurance payments, they still hadn't covered half, and with Lucy's college tuition coming due. Her phone buzzed, a text from Everett Langston's assistant. "First appointment scheduled. Car will pick you up tomorrow at 8 a.m. Reality settled over her like a heavy blanket. This was happening. She was really doing this. "At least tell me about him," Regina said, nodding at the phone. "This mysterious businessman who's about to become a very significant part of your life." Janelle thought about Everett's office, about the strange contradiction of the cold, modern space and that beautiful grand piano, about his carefully controlled voice and the flash of something raw in his eyes when she'd mentioned complications. "He's complicated," she settled on, "all sharp edges on the outside, but I think there's something else underneath. Something he's trying very hard to hide." Regina's eyebrows rose. "Sounds like you've been paying attention." "I'm observant, not interested," Janelle corrected quickly. "Besides, it's literally in the contract. No emotional entanglements." "Honey," Regina smiled, standing up, "I've known you since you were teaching yourself to read in the library during lunch breaks. You don't know how to do anything without your whole heart involved." Before Janelle could protest, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Lucy. "Big sis, guess who aced their biology midterm? This future doctor right here." Pride and pain twisted in Janelle's chest. Lucy was brilliant, destined for great things, if only they could keep her in school long enough to achieve them. The contract with Everett Langston would ensure that, at least. "I should go," Janelle said, gathering her things. "Need to prep for tomorrow's appointment." Regina pulled her into a tight hug. Promise me you'll be careful, not just with your body, with your heart. My heart's not part of the deal, Janelle assured her, but even as she said it, she wondered if any part of ourselves could truly be kept separate from the rest. Vours ago across the city, Everett sat in his home office, staring at an old photograph he usually kept locked away. A younger version of himself smiled back, arm around a woman with auburn hair. Between them, they held a sonogram picture like it was made of gold. Mr. Langston. His housekeeper's voice came through the intercom. Dr. Chen is here for your evening appointment. Everett quickly returned the photo to its drawer. Send her up. Dr. Christina Chen had been his therapist for 6 years, ever since the incident that had nearly destroyed everything. She settled into her usual chair, perfectly composed in her charcoal grey suit. You signed the contract. It wasn't really a question. Tomorrow morning. Everett stood, walking to the window. From here, he could see Central Park spread out below, a dark rectangle carved into the city's glittering geometry. The lawyers added her sister's tuition clause. That bothers you. It makes sense. It's practical. Insurance against the worst-case scenario. That's not what I asked. Everett's jaw tightened. It reminds me of Rebecca, of how careful I thought I was then, how many precautions I took, and still, Rebecca manipulated you, Dr. Chen said quietly. She used your desire for a family to steal your company's research. That's not going to happen again. No, Everett agreed, because this time there are no emotions involved, just a clear contract, professional boundaries, and mutual benefit. Dr. Chen was silent for a moment, studying him. Tell me about her, this woman who's agreeing to carry your child. Everett thought about Janelle Thomas, about the way she'd quoted the contract from memory, about her quiet strength and unexpected humor, about how she'd noticed his piano and somehow known exactly what kind of music haunted his sleepless nights. She's different, he said finally. Not what I expected. Different how? She sees things, details. She's not intimidated by me or the situation. And she has this way of... He trailed off, realizing he was saying too much. Of what? Of making it all feel human. The word fell between them like a challenge. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. And that scares you. No, Everett said too quickly. That's not relevant. The contract is clear. Professional interaction only. Dr. Chen made a note in her pad. And how many times have you played the piano since meeting her? Everett's hands clenched behind his back. He hadn't played at all, but Chopin's nocturnes had been running through his head for days. We're done for today, he said firmly. After Dr. Chen left, Everett found himself at the piano, fingers hovering over the keys. Tomorrow everything would begin, the appointments, the procedures, the careful dance of creating life while maintaining distance. Tomorrow he would see Janelle Thomas again, and they would start down this strange path together. He pressed a key, then another. The opening notes of Nocturne Op. 9. No 2 filled the room, soft and questioning in the gathering dark. Somewhere across the city, a young woman touched her mother's pendant and prepared for tomorrow, while a college student celebrated her biology mid-term, and a principal worried about the heart of a girl who had never learned how not to care. The music continued, floating out over the city like a prayer, or perhaps a warning, because sometimes the things we try hardest to prevent are exactly the things we need most to save us. The fertility clinic occupied the entire 20th floor of a sleek medical building in Upper Manhattan. Janelle sat in the waiting room, surrounded by couples holding hands and sharing nervous smiles. She was the only one sitting alone, until the elevator doors opened and Everett Langston stepped out, looking like he'd walked straight off a business magazine cover in his charcoal suit and blue tie. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither moved. Then Everett crossed the space between them, taking the seat beside her with careful precision, as if measuring the exact professional distance required. Ms. Thomas. He nodded formally. Mr. Langston? She matched his tone, though her lips twitched. Lovely tie, matches your discomfort perfectly. He stiffened, then caught the glimmer of humor in her eyes. I wasn't aware my discomfort had a color scheme. Oh, definitely. Right now you're somewhere between board meeting blue and first date flustered. She kept her voice light, professional, even as she noticed how his shoulders relaxed slightly at her teasing. I assure you, I don't get flustered on first dates. He paused. Or any dates these days. Married to the job? Something like that. Before she could respond, a nurse called out, Thomas and Langston? They stood in unison, following her down a hallway lined with photos of smiling babies. Janelle noticed how Everett's eyes lingered on each one. Dr. Adelaide Warner's office was warm and welcoming, with abstract paintings on the walls and a desk free of the usual medical clutter. The doctor herself, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked black hair, greeted them with a smile that suggested she'd seen every possible combination of awkward situations in her line of work. So, she said, after they'd settled into their chairs, let's talk about making a baby. Janelle felt Everett shift beside her and fought back a smile. For someone about to become a father, he looked remarkably like a teenager in sex education class. Doctor. Warner pulled up their files on her computer. I see all the preliminary screenings came back excellent. Ms. Thomas, your health history is impressive, and Mr. Langston, your genetic panels show no concerns. She looked between them. Now, have you discussed your preferred method? Given the circumstances, I'd recommend IVF rather than artificial insemination. IVF, Everett said quickly. At the same time, Janelle nodded. They glanced at each other, then away. Good, we're aligned. Dr. Warner began explaining the process, but Janelle found her attention drifting to Everett's hands, clasped tightly in his lap. Long fingers, pianist's hands. They twitched slightly when Dr. Warner mentioned hormone injections. Ms. Thomas will need daily injections, the doctor was saying. It's best if someone can help with the ones that go in the lower back. Do you have someone who can assist? I can hire a nurse, Everett offered immediately. My sister's pre-med, Janelle countered. She can help. Your sister has midterms, he said, surprising her that he'd remembered. A professional would be better. A professional would mean more questions, more potential complications with confidentiality. She met his gaze steadily. Lucy is family. She knows how to be discreet. Doctor. Warner watched their exchange with interest. The injections won't start for a few weeks. You have time to figure it out. She turned to her desk and pulled out a calendar. First, we need to sync Miss Thomas's cycle and begin the egg retrieval process from our donor. The word donor hung in the air. Janelle had wondered about that. Why a man as wealthy as Everett Langston would choose an egg donor rather than seeking a traditional surrogate. Another piece of his puzzle. Another question she wasn't supposed to ask. The rest of the appointment passed in a blur of schedules, instructions, and pamphlets. By the time they left the office, Janelle's head was spinning with medical terminology and dates. In the elevator, Everett finally broke their silence. My driver can take you home. I'm actually heading to Brooklyn Heights, Lucy's apartment. At his questioning look, she added, sister bonding night. Last one before. She gestured vaguely at her still flat stomach. Ah, he seemed to struggle with something. Would she like to see the contract edition? Regarding her tuition? Janelle studied him in the elevator's mirrored walls. You could show her yourself. Join us for dinner. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Professional boundaries. No emotional entanglements. What was she thinking? I mean, she backtracked quickly, if you want to ensure everything's clear, legally speaking. Everett's reflections stared back at her, his expression unreadable. That would be acceptable, professionally speaking. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and they stepped out into the late afternoon sunlight. Everett's driver held the car door open, and Janelle slid in first, sending a quick text to Lucy. Change of plans, setting an extra plate for dinner. Don't panic, but I'm bringing my baby daddy. She could feel Everett watching her type, probably wondering what she was saying. Let him wonder. She had enough mysteries of his to solve. The car pulled into traffic, and Janelle found herself watching the city scroll past, thinking about all the ways lives could intertwine, despite our best efforts to keep them separate. About how sometimes the most important connections started with nothing more than a contract, a calendar, and a conversation about injection schedules. "You're very quiet," Everett observed. "Just thinking about hearts," she said softly. "The medical checkup results." "No," she smiled, remembering something her mother used to say, about how they never seem to follow the plans we make for them. Everett's hand tightened on his briefcase, but he said nothing. Outside, the sun was setting behind Manhattan's towers, painting the sky in shades of possibility. Somewhere ahead, Lucy was probably panic-cleaning her apartment, and beyond that lay a future neither of them had planned for. But for now, there was just this, a quiet car, two people pretending they weren't stealing glances at each other, and the steady rhythm of two hearts beating their own patterns, regardless of what any contract might say. Lucy Thomas's apartment in Brooklyn Heights was exactly what you'd expect from a scholarship student with artistic tendencies and a limited budget. Mismatched furniture rescued from thrift stores, walls covered in vintage movie posters, and textbooks stacked everywhere like modern art installations. But the small space was immaculate. Janelle could tell her sister had panic-cleaned the moment she got the text. "Your sister lives here?" Everett asked as they climbed the narrow stairs, his tone carefully neutral. "Not all of us have penthouses in Manhattan," Janelle replied, then immediately regretted the edge in her voice. "Sorry, that was accurate," he finished, surprising her with a small smile. "Though I prefer to think of it as an efficiently organized living space with an optimal view." "Of course you do." They reached the third floor, and before Janelle could knock, the door flew open. Lucy stood there, barely containing her nervous energy. At 21, she was a younger, slightly shorter version of Janelle, with the same dark curls but lighter brown eyes that now widened at the sight of Everett. "Oh, wow," she blurted out. "You really are going to be one good-looking baby." "Lucy," Janelle hissed, mortified, but Everett's reaction surprised them both. He laughed, a real laugh, unexpected and warm, transforming his entire face. "I'm more interested in the baby's potential intelligence. Your sister mentioned your pre-med." Lucy beamed, ushering them inside. "Top of my class at NYU. Come in. I made Mom's lasagna." "Well, I tried to make Mom's lasagna. It might be more of a pasta-adjacent experiment." The apartment smelled of garlic and herbs, with a hint of burning that suggested Lucy's culinary skills were still evolving. Janelle noticed Everett taking in the details. The family photos on the walls, the medical textbooks, the small upright piano in the corner that had seen better days. "You play?" he asked Lucy, gesturing to the piano. "God, no. That's Jan's territory. Mum tried teaching us both, but I have the musical talent of a tone-deaf penguin." Lucy disappeared into the tiny kitchen, calling back, "Jan's the artistic one. I just cut people open. Or will, eventually." Janelle watched Everett process this, saw him look at the piano with new interest. Before he could comment, Lucy returned with a bottle of wine, then caught herself. "Oh, Jan can't drink now, right? Because of the—" She waved vaguely at her stomach. "Not yet," Janelle corrected. "The procedure hasn't started, but I probably shouldn't anyway." "I don't drink," Everett said suddenly. When both sisters looked at him, he added, "Alcohol interferes with clear decision-making." Speaking of decisions, Lucy set out plates with the confidence of someone changing subjects. "Jan says you added a clause about my tuition." "You didn't have to do that. It was a reasonable request." Everett's professional mask slipped back into place. "Given the nature of our arrangement, all contingencies should be addressed. Right?" "The arrangement," Lucy's tone cooled slightly. She turned to the kitchen, but not before Janelle caught the protective glint in her eyes. Dinner was a careful dance of conversation. Lucy asked about Everett's company, genuinely interested in their medical research. Everett, in turn, surprised them both with thoughtful questions about her studies, but whenever the discussion turned personal, he redirected with the skill of someone who'd spent years keeping people at arm's length. It wasn't until Lucy mentioned their mother's work as a music teacher that something shifted. "She taught at PS 321 for 20 years, Janelle explained, pushing her lasagna around her plate. They said music was the purest form of human connection." "What happened?" Everett asked softly, then seemed to regret the question. "Cancer," Lucy answered when Janelle couldn't. 2 years ago. It was fast." Silence fell, heavy with unspoken grief. Then Everett did something unexpected. He stood and walked to the piano, opening the lid with gentle reverence. "May I?" Janelle nodded, not trusting her voice. He sat down, adjusted the bench, and began to play. The melody was haunting, beautiful, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The old piano, despite its age, responded to his touch, like it had been waiting for him. Lucy slipped her hand into Janelle's under the table, squeezing tight. Their mother had played this piece often, on Sunday mornings, when the light was just right and the world felt soft around the edges. When the last note faded, no one spoke for a long moment. Then Lucy cleared her throat. "Well, that's not fair. How are we supposed to maintain professional boundaries when you go around playing people's souls like that?" "Lucy," Janelle warned, but Everett had already stiffened, his walls visibly rebuilding. "I apologize. That was inappropriate." He stood quickly. "I should go. Thank you for dinner." "You didn't even try dessert," Lucy protested. "And I bought cheesecake from Junior's." "Another time, perhaps." But they all heard the lie in his voice. At the door, he turned to Janelle. "The car will pick you up Tuesday for the next appointment, 9 a.m. "I can take the subway," she started, but he was already heading down the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the narrow stairwell. Lucy waited until they heard the building door close. "Well, that was—" "Don't. I'm just saying, for someone who claims to want no emotional attachment, he sure has a funny way of showing it." Janelle began clearing the plates, needing to move, to do something with her hands. "It's not like that. It's just business." "Right." Lucy started loading the dishwasher. "Because most businessmen drive across Brooklyn to review contracts over dinner and then play perfect Chopin on strangers' pianos. He's not." Janelle stopped, realizing she'd been about to say, "a stranger." When had that happened? When had he become something more than a name on a contract? "You know what Mom would say about all this?" Lucy asked softly. "That the heart knows what it wants before the mind catches up." Janelle touched her mother's pendant. But this isn't about hearts, Luce. It's about giving you a future, about doing what needs to be done. And what about your future?" Janelle looked at the piano, still holding the warmth of Everett's music. "My future is exactly what I planned. 9 months, 1 baby, no complications." Lucy hugged her from behind, resting her chin on Janelle's shoulder. "You know what else Mom used to say? Life is what happens while you're making other plans." Outside, a car horn honked, and somewhere in the distance, a train rumbled over the Manhattan Bridge. Inside, 2 sisters held each other in their tiny Brooklyn apartment, while the ghost of a nocturne hung in the air like a question waiting to be answered. And across the river, in a penthouse with an optimal view, a man sat at a grand piano but didn't play, his fingers remembering the feel of old keys and the look in a woman's eyes when music said what words couldn't. The first hormone injection shouldn't have been complicated. The needle was thin, the dosage precise, and Lucy had practiced the motion dozens of times on an orange. But standing in her small bathroom at 7 a.m., Janelle couldn't stop shaking. "Maybe we should call the clinic," Lucy suggested, holding the syringe. "Get a nurse to—" "No!" Janelle gripped the edge of the sink. "We can do this." Her phone buzzed. A text from Everett. "Everything okay? The car's been waiting for 10 minutes. Another buzz. "I'm coming up." "No, don't." Janelle started typing, but footsteps were already approaching. A knock on the apartment door. Lucy looked at her sister, panic mixing with amusement. "Well, This should be interesting. Janelle wrapped her robe tighter and opened the door to find Everett standing there, impeccable as always in a navy suit, concern etched across his features. "You're late," he said, then noticed her robe, her bare feet. His ears reddened slightly. "I apologize, I shouldn't have. We're having a slight technical difficulty," Lucy called from the bathroom. "First injection jitters." Understanding dawned on his face. Without a word, he set his briefcase down and rolled up his sleeves. "May I?" Janelle and Lucy exchanged looks. "You know how to do this." "I did my research." He held out his hand for the syringe. "Plus, I own a biotech company. I've picked up a few things." In the small bathroom, space suddenly became precious. Everett's presence seemed to fill every available inch, his cologne mixing with the morning air. "Turn around," he instructed softly. Janelle complied, hyper-aware of his proximity as he gently moved her robe aside to expose the injection site on her lower back. His fingers were warm against her skin as he located the right spot. "Deep breath," he murmured. The needle went in smoothly, professionally. She barely felt it. And done. When she turned back around, he was disposing of the needle with practiced efficiency, while Lucy watched with undisguised approval. "And that was impressive," her sister admitted. "Way better than my orange practice sessions. I'll show you the proper technique." Everett's voice was still quiet, careful. "For tomorrow." The moment stretched, filled with unspoken things. Then Janelle's phone alarm chimed, a reminder of their appointment. "I'll get dressed," she said quickly, escaping to her bedroom. Through the door, she heard Lucy ask, "So exactly how much research did you do about all this? Everything relevant to ensuring a healthy pregnancy?" And did that research include learning why some surrogates and intended parents end up—" "Lucy!" Janelle emerged, fully dressed, cutting off whatever dangerous direction that conversation was heading. The drive to the clinic was quiet, but different from their usual silences. Everett kept his eyes on his phone, though Janelle noticed he wasn't actually reading anything on the screen. "Thank you," she said finally, "for this morning." It was practical. His voice was clipped. "We need to maintain the schedule precisely." "Right, practical." She turned to look out the window, missing the way his hands tightened on his phone. At the clinic, Dr. Warner had news. "The egg donor's retrieval was successful," she announced, pulling up images on her screen. "We've created several viable embryos. If you'd like to see—" Everett stood abruptly. "I trust your judgment on selection. I have a meeting." He paused at the door, not quite looking at Janelle. "The car will wait." After he left, Dr. Warner raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "Fine." Janelle forced a smile. "Or just maintaining professional boundaries?" The doctor pulled up another screen. "Well, speaking of professional, we need to discuss your living arrangements during the first trimester. Given the delicate nature of IVF pregnancies, we recommend minimal stress and consistent monitoring." "I'm not sure what you mean." "Your apartment is a third-floor walk-up in Brooklyn. You work full-time. The daily injections and appointments." Dr. Warner hesitated. Has Mr. Langston mentioned the apartment in his building?" Janelle's stomach dropped. "What apartment?" "He's reserved a fully furnished unit on the 15th floor, with an elevator, 24-hour security, and importantly, proximity to the clinic." She smiled gently. "Didn't he tell you?" "No." Janelle's voice was barely a whisper. "He didn't." The rest of the appointment passed in a blur. When she emerged, Everett was waiting by the car, looking like a man preparing for battle. "When were you going to tell me about the apartment?" she demanded. "Today, after the confirmation." He opened the car door. "It's a practical solution." "Practical?" She didn't get in. "Moving me into your building like some kept woman." His jaw tightened. "The contract includes provisions for suitable housing during the pregnancy." "This is suitable. It's control." The words hit their mark. She saw him flinch. "You can't just rearrange my life without asking. Your current living situation isn't optimal for—" "For what?" "For your perfect plan, your neat, emotionless arrangement." She was causing a scene, drawing looks from passers-by, but she couldn't stop. "I'm not one of your employees, Everett. You can't just move me around like a chess piece." His face closed off completely. "No, you're not an employee. You're a contracted surrogate. And the contract. She threw up her hands. "Did you research everything except how to be a human being?" The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Hurt flashed across his face before disappearing behind his usual mask. "The apartment is available whenever you're ready," he said flatly. "The car will take you home." He turned and walked away, each step precise and measured, professional, perfect, empty. Janelle sank into the car, anger giving way to exhaustion. Her phone buzzed, Lucy checking in. How'd it go? How could she even begin to explain? How could she describe the way Everett's hands had been so gentle this morning, how his eyes had softened when she winced at the needle, how, for just a moment, it had felt like... But that was the problem, wasn't it? It had felt like something beyond contracts and arrangements, something that made her want to shake him until his perfect walls crumbled, until the man who played Chopin in the dark emerged and stayed. Her hand drifted to her stomach, still flat but now holding their future in its most fragile form. Somewhere in the city, a man she wasn't supposed to care about was probably sitting in his perfect office, maintaining his perfect distance, hiding from the mess of human connection. She texted Lucy back, "I think I just yelled at a billionaire about his emotional constipation." The response came quickly, "Mum would be so proud." Janelle laughed despite herself, even as tears threatened. Because the truth was, their mother would have taken one look at Everett Langston and seen right through him, would have recognized the hurt behind his walls, the longing behind his control, would have known, as Janelle was starting to know, that sometimes the hardest hearts to reach are the ones most worth fighting for. 3 days of silence felt like an eternity. Everett's driver still came for the appointments, but the man himself was conspicuously absent. Even Dr. Warner noticed, shooting concerned glances at the empty chair during checkups. On the 4th night, Janelle couldn't sleep. The hormone treatments left her restless, and Lucy was pulling an all-nighter at the library for finals. The empty apartment felt too quiet, too small. Without really deciding to, she found herself taking the subway to Manhattan. The night doorman at Everett's building recognized her from their appointments. "Mr. Langston is still in his office. Ms. Thomas, 47th floor." She hadn't planned to go to the office, hadn't planned anything, really. But the elevator was already rising, numbers climbing like her heartbeat. The floor was dark except for light spilling from his corner office. And music, Chopin again, but different this time. Darker, storm clouds in sound. She found him at the piano, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, tie loose around his neck. He didn't look up when she entered, but his fingers faltered slightly on the keys. "That's not your usual nocturne," she said softly. "Nocturne in C minor." His voice was rough, tired. "Sometimes the gentle ones don't say enough." "And what are you trying to say?" His hands stilled on the keys. "Why are you here, Miss Thomas?" Back to Ms. Thomas now. She moved closer, stopping just beyond the piano's shadow. "I thought injecting hormones into someone's back earned you first-name privileges. The nurse can handle the injections from now on." "I don't want a nurse." Finally, he looked at her. In the dim light, his face was all angles and shadows, exhaustion etched in every line. "What do you want?" "For you to stop hiding." The words came out before she could catch them. "For you to admit that this, whatever this is, it's not just business anymore." He stood abruptly, moving to the windows. The city sprawled below, a galaxy of lights and possibilities. "It has to be business. Anything else is too dangerous." "Why?" "Because I've been here before." The words exploded out of him. He pressed his forehead against the glass, breath fogging the surface. "A baby. A woman I thought I could trust. I let myself feel, let myself hope." He stopped, shoulders rigid with tension. Janelle took a step toward him, then another. "Tell me." For a long moment, only the city's distant hum filled the silence. Then, slowly, like ice cracking in spring, her name was Rebecca. She was brilliant, beautiful, and completely false. She used my research to develop a competing product, then claimed the baby was someone else's. By the time the truth came out, I'd lost everything. My company's breakthrough drug, my reputation, my child. His voice cracked. She wasn't even pregnant. It was all fabricated. Every ultrasound, every moment. Everett. Janelle reached for him, but he flinched away. Don't! He turned, face composed but eyes wild. Don't make this personal. Please. It's already personal. She gestured to her stomach. It became personal the moment you played Chopin in my sister's apartment, the moment you showed up for my first injection, the moment you arranged an apartment because you were worried about me climbing stairs. Those were practical decisions. Were they? Or were they your heart making choices while your head wasn't looking? He made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a groan. You sound like my therapist. Smart woman. She thinks I'm using the contract as a shield. Aren't you? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed, an urgent email notification. He glanced at it, and all color drained from his face. What's wrong? Wilson. He was already moving, gathering papers from his desk. My largest investor. Someone leaked details about our arrangement to him. Is that bad? He's very traditional, very public about family values. Everett's movements became more frantic. He's threatening to pull his investment and go to the press. Says this kind of manufactured family will destroy the company's image. Janelle felt the floor tilt beneath her. He can't. Surrogacy is legal, common even. Not the way we're doing it. Everett ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect arrangement. Single man, private contract, no agency involvement. He's painting it as ethically questionable, demanding I end the arrangement immediately. End it. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach. But we've already... I know. He stopped moving, finally looking at her directly. I won't do it. I'll buy him out first. Can you afford that? No. He sank into his chair. Not without selling most of my personal assets. The company's research requires constant funding. Janelle's mind raced. What about a compromise? We could make it look more traditional. What do you mean? The apartment. I'll take it. She took a deep breath. We'll be seen together at charity events, social functions. Present a united front. Let them think we're a modern family choosing an unconventional path. That would mean breaking about 15 clauses in our contract? Yes. She managed a small smile. But keeping your company intact. He stared at her, something raw and wondering in his expression. Why would you do that? Because I've seen how you look at baby pictures in the clinic. Because you learn injection techniques to make sure I don't hurt. Because you play sad nocturnes at midnight and pretend you don't feel anything. She moved closer, until she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. And because some things are worth breaking contracts for. Outside, the city hummed its eternal rhythm. Inside, two people stood in the darkness, while a half-finished nocturne hung in the air between them, like a question finally finding its answer. It would be complicated, he said finally. Life usually is. People would assume. Let them. His hand moved, almost touching her face before dropping back to his side. Do the contract... Maybe some things can't be contained in contracts. She smiled, thinking of her mother. Maybe some things need room to grow on their own. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Really looked at her. Like he was seeing past all his careful walls and her stubborn defenses to something deeper, something true. Then he turned to the piano, sat down, and began to play. Not Chopin this time. Something lighter, hopeful. An invitation. Janelle moved to stand beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Together, they watched the sunrise paint Manhattan in shades of new beginnings, while the music rose around them like a promise neither of them had planned to make. The society pages called it the romance of the season. Start-up billionaire Everett Langston, finally settling down with the beautiful mother of his child. The photos were everywhere. Everett helping Janelle out of cars, their appearances at charity galas, quiet dinners at exclusive restaurants. The public ate it up. The modern fairy tale of the shy CEO and the down-to-earth Brooklyn girl, if only they knew. "You're trending again," Lucy announced, sprawled on the sofa in Janelle's new apartment. The place was ridiculously gorgeous, all floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture. But Janelle had insisted on bringing her old reading chair and some family photos, small anchors of reality in this surreal new world. "What is it this time?" Janelle was trying to zip up an evening gown that definitely hadn't been this snug last week. At 12 weeks pregnant, her body was beginning to betray their carefully orchestrated timeline. Power couple goals. Langston and Thomas Steele show at Cancer Research Benefit. There's a picture of him adjusting your wrap. Lucy grinned. "You have to admit, he's getting good at this public affection thing. It's an act." But even as she said it, Janelle remembered how his hands had lingered on her shoulders, how his eyes had met hers in the mirror with something that felt anything but staged. Her phone buzzed. Everett. "Car in 10. Don't forget Wilson will be at this one." Right, Wilson, the investor whose threats had started this whole charade. Tonight was their first direct encounter with him at the Langston Biotech annual gala. Lucy sat up, suddenly serious. "Are you sure you're up for this?" The doctor said to avoid stress. "I'm fine." Janelle touched her barely visible bump. "Besides, we need Wilson to believe in this, whatever this is. The company's latest trial results come out next week." The doorbell rang. Everett, early as usual. Lucy opened the door, then whistled low. "Damn, Mr. Langston. That tux is lethal." He did look devastating in black tie, but it was the tension in his shoulders that caught Janelle's attention. This evening mattered more than he was letting on. "Lucy." He nodded, then stopped short at the sight of Janelle. Something flickered in his eyes before he caught himself. "You look like I'm about to pop a zipper." Janelle tried to lighten the moment. "Beautiful," he finished quietly. Lucy made a show of checking her phone. "And that's my cue to leave. Try not to break too many hearts tonight, you too." After she left, silence filled the apartment. Everett moved behind Janelle, his reflection appearing in her mirror. "May I?" She nodded, and his fingers moved to the stubborn zipper, careful and sure. But when it was done, he didn't step away immediately. His hand rested at the small of her back, warm through the silk. "The latest scans looked good," she said, needing to break the tension. "Dr. Warner says everything's right on schedule." "I know, I read the reports." His voice was low, close to her ear. "Are you sure you're ready for tonight? Wilson can be intense. I think the real question is, are you ready?" She turned to face him, to let someone else see past those perfect walls. Something shifted in his expression. "Janelle." But whatever he was about to say was interrupted by his phone. The car was waiting. The gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Temple of Dender transformed into a glittering wonderland of lights and music. As they ascended the steps, photographers called their names. Everett's arm slipped around her waist, practiced and protective. "Remember," he murmured, "Wilson will be watching everything, every gesture, every look. Then let's give him something to watch." Before he could respond, she turned into him, straightening his bow tie. To anyone watching, it would look like an intimate gesture between lovers. Only Everett could feel how her hands trembled slightly. "Ready for your close-up, Mr. Langston?" A genuine smile touched his lips. "With you, always." They made their entrance perfectly, the power couple, the modern romance. Janelle charmed board members while Everett discussed quarterly projections. They danced exactly twice, his hand properly placed on her back, her head at just the right angle for photos. Everything choreographed, measured, safe, until Wilson appeared. He was shorter than Janelle had imagined, but his presence filled the space around him. "Langston," he boomed, "and the lovely Mims. Thomas, or should I say the future Mrs. Langston." Janelle felt Everett stiffen beside her. This wasn't part of their script. "Charles," Everett's voice was carefully neutral. "Enjoying the evening?" Immensely. Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes, especially watching you two. You know, when I first heard about this arrangement, I had my doubts. But seeing you together, he paused deliberately. Tell me, Ms. Thomas, what was it about Everett that first caught your attention, besides the obvious financial advantages? The room seemed to still. Everett's hand tightened on her waist, but before he could speak, Janelle laughed. The sound was light, genuine, surprising them all. Actually, it was his hands, she said. Wilson blinked. His hands. She turned to look at Everett, letting real memory soften her voice. The first time I saw him play piano, he was so careful, so precise. But there was all this passion underneath, this depth most people never see. She smiled up at him. That's when I knew he'd be an amazing father. Everett's eyes widened slightly, recognizing the truth woven through her performance. Wilson was watching them intently. And you, Langston, he pressed, what drew you to Ms. Thomas? For a moment, Janelle thought Everett would give their usual polite, practiced answer. Instead, he looked down at her, something raw and honest breaking through his careful mask. She sees me, he said simply. Not the CEO, not the reputation, not the facade. Just me. The music changed. Another waltz. Wilson nodded, seemingly satisfied. Well, don't let me keep you from your dance. As they moved onto the dance floor, Everett pulled her closer than their choreographed distance. That was true, she finished. At least my part was. His steps faltered slightly. Janelle. I know. She pressed her forehead to his shoulder, hiding from the cameras, from Wilson, from the weight of everything unsaid between them. I know we can't. The contract, the company, everything at stake. I know. His hand slid from her back to her waist, cradling the subtle curve where their child grew. For a moment, they weren't performing anymore. They were just two people holding each other in the dark, dancing to music that sounded too much like longing. Sometimes, he whispered, so quietly she almost missed it. I wish none of it mattered. Above them, the ancient temple's walls rose into darkness, while below, 100 phones captured the perfect couple in their perfect moment. Only they knew the real story written in the space between their hearts, of contracts breaking silently, of walls crumbling despite their best efforts, of love growing in all the places they'd tried to protect against it. The music played on, and they kept dancing, neither willing to be the first to let go. The first signs of trouble came at 3 a.m., 2 days after the gala. Janelle woke to sharp pains and a fear that clawed at her throat. Her hands shook as she dialed Everett's number. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? Something's not right. Her voice cracked. I'm scared. Don't move. I'm coming. She heard him running, heard doors opening and closing. In the 15 minutes it took him to reach her apartment, she counted every second, one hand pressed to her stomach, whispering prayers her mother had taught her. When Everett burst through the door, still in his pajama pants and a hastily thrown-on sweater, hair wild and feet bare, she almost cried at the sight. He crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her bed. Where's the pain? His hands hovered over her. Uncertain for the first time she could remember, she guided them to her lower abdomen. Here. It comes and goes. But another wave hit, and she grabbed his hand, squeezing hard. I'm calling Dr. Warner. He didn't pull his hand away, letting her hold on as he used his other to dial. My car's downstairs. Can you walk? She nodded, but when she tried to stand, the room spun. Without hesitation, Everett scooped her up, one arm under her knees, the other supporting her back. The contract, she mumbled against his chest, punchy with fear and pain. Pretty sure this violates Section 12. Fuck the contract. His voice was raw, desperate. She felt his heart hammering where her head rested against him. The next hours passed in a blur of hospital corridors and medical terms. Dr. Warner met them in emergency, her face serious as she reviewed the ultrasound. There's some spotting, but the heartbeat is strong. She pointed to the screen, where their baby's heart flickered like a star. It looks like round ligament pain, combined with dehydration and stress. Your body's telling you to slow down. Everett, who hadn't left Janelle's side despite the nurse's pointed looks, let out a shaky breath. What do we do? Bed rest. At least a week. No events, no stress, no negotiations. She looked pointedly at them both. Whatever game you two are playing with the press and investors, it stops now. This baby doesn't care about public relations. After she left, silence filled the hospital room. Dawn was breaking outside, painting the Manhattan skyline in watercolor pinks and golds. Janelle watched Everett pacing, his bare feet incongruous against the sterile floor. "You should go home," she said softly. "Put on some shoes. Get ready for work." He stopped pacing. "I'm not going anywhere." "Everett, I can't." The words seemed torn from him. "I can't leave, can't focus, can't pretend anymore." He raked his hands through his already chaotic hair. "Do you know what I felt when you called? When I heard the fear in your voice?" She shook her head, though her heart was suddenly racing faster than any monitor could track. Like my world was ending. Again, but worse this time because... He stopped, struggling. "Because it's not just about the baby, it's about you. It's been about you for weeks, maybe since that first day in my office when you quoted the contract from memory and made jokes about my tie. Don't," she tried to make her voice firm, but it wavered. "Don't say things you can't take back. I don't want to take them back." He moved closer until he was standing beside her bed. "When Rebecca betrayed me, I thought I'd never trust again. Never let anyone close enough to matter. I built walls, wrote contracts, tried to control every variable." His laugh was hollow. "And then you walked in and saw right through every defense, like they were made of glass. We had a deal," she whispered. "Professional boundaries. No complications." "It's too late for that." He reached out, hesitating before brushing a curl from her face. "And then I think it was too late, the moment you told me to play Chopin in your sister's apartment." The monitor beeped steadily, marking the seconds as they stretched between them. Outside, the city was waking up, but in this room, time seemed to stand still. "I'm scared too," she admitted finally. "Not just about tonight, about all of it, about how much I..." She stopped, pressing her hands to her eyes. "God, this is such a mess. We're supposed to be business partners, co-parents at most, not what? Not something that makes my heart stop when you look at me like that." She let her hands fall, meeting his gaze. "Not something that makes me want to break every clause in that damn contract just to see you smile. Not something that feels so much like love." His voice was barely a whisper. The word hung between them, too big for the small hospital room, too real for their carefully constructed facade. Janelle felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Lucy's going to be insufferable about this," she managed, making him laugh softly. "Dr. Chen, too." He sat on the edge of her bed, taking her hand. His fingers trembled slightly. "What she's been telling me for weeks, that I was using the contract to hide from my feelings. Smart woman." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Not as smart as the woman who saw through all my defenses and decided to stay anyway." A knock at the door made them both jump. A nurse entered with admission papers and instructions for home care during bed rest. "Will you be staying with her?" she asked Everett. "It's recommended to have someone there 24/7 for the first few days." Before he could answer, Janelle squeezed his hand. "He'll be there. He's always there when it matters." The nurse smiled knowingly and left them alone again. Everett looked down at their joined hands. "You know this changes everything," he said softly. "Wilson, the company, the press. I know. It won't be easy. When has anything worth having ever been easy?" He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "Have I mentioned that I love you?" "Not technically." She pulled him closer. "But you might want to fix that oversight." "I love you," he whispered, forehead pressed to hers. "Contract be damned." Outside, the sun rose fully over Manhattan, warming the room with golden light. Somewhere in the city, a piano waited to play love songs instead of nocturnes, and a contract lay forgotten in a drawer. its careful clauses giving way to something far more powerful, the simple, unstoppable truth of two hearts finding their way home. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Langston Biotech shares plummet as Wilson Investments withdraws support. The headlines scrolled across every financial network, each one more dramatic than the last. In Janelle's apartment, now their apartment, though neither had officially acknowledged the shift, Everett stood by the windows, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I understand the board's concerns," he was saying, his reflection grim in the glass. "No, I won't be issuing a statement about my personal life. The company's latest trial results speak for themselves." Janelle watched him from her prescribed spot on the couch, where she'd been confined to bed rest for the past week. Lucy sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, painting her toenails a defiant shade of red. "Your boyfriend's about to wear a hole in that expensive flooring," Lucy murmured. "He's not my—" Janelle stopped at her sister's raised eyebrow. "It's complicated. Only because you both make it complicated." Lucy capped the nail polish. "You love each other. You're having a baby. The rest is just noise." But it wasn't just noise. Wilson's withdrawal had triggered a cascade of problems: nervous investors, media speculation, and worst of all, questions about the original surrogacy arrangement. The carefully constructed story they'd built was unraveling, and the truth underneath was messier than any PR team could spin. Everett ended his call and came to sit beside Janelle, his movements careful as if she might break. She'd noticed this new protectiveness since the hospital, the way he tracked her every grimace, how he'd installed a mini-fridge by the couch so she wouldn't have to get up for water, his insistence on working from home despite the company crisis. "But that bad?" she asked, taking his hand. "Wilson's making sure every financial publication knows exactly why he pulled out." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "He's painting it as a moral stance against unconventional families and contractual relationships." "Ironic," Lucy snorted, "considering his 3 marriages and very public divorces." "It's not about morality," Everett said quietly. "It's about control. He thought he could force us to play by his rules. When that failed," he shrugged, but Janelle felt the tension in his shoulders. "We could still try to salvage it," she offered. "Release a statement, explain the original arrangement." "No." His voice was firm. "I'm done hiding, done pretending. If the company suffers because I fell in love with the mother of my child, then maybe it deserves to suffer." Lucy made a sound suspiciously like a squeal. "And I'm just going to go somewhere that's not here. You two clearly need to talk." She gathered her things, pausing to kiss Janelle's cheek. "Don't do anything that would scandalize Wilson more than you already have." After she left, silence settled over the apartment. Outside, a light rain began to fall, drumming against the windows like distant applause. "Did you mean that?" Janelle asked finally. "About being done hiding." Everett turned to face her fully. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day? About how I'd researched everything except how to be human?" She winced. "I was angry." "You were right." He smiled slightly. "I had everything mapped out, every scenario accounted for, except the one where I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you." "Irrevocably?" She tried to keep her tone light, even as her heart raced. "That's a big word, Mr. Langston." "I'm a man of precision." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "When I choose a word, I mean it." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed again, this time with breaking news that made him sit up straight. "What is it?" "The trial results." His voice was incredulous. "They're better than we hoped, significantly better. The new drug." He showed her the screen, where graphs and statistics painted a picture of breakthrough success. "That's good, right? The investors will see." "It's not about the investors anymore." He set the phone down, taking both her hands in his. "Don't you see? This changes everything. The company's value just tripled. Wilson's shares are worth 3 times what they were yesterday," she finished, understanding dawning. "He'll want back in. He'll demand back in." Everett's smile turned predatory. "Which puts us in an interesting position." "What are you thinking?" He stood, pulling her carefully to her feet despite her protests about bed rest. "I'm thinking it's time to rewrite the rules." Leading her to the piano, he sat and drew her down beside him. "Wilson wants traditional. Let's give him traditional." Everett. His fingers found the keys, and the opening notes of Pachelbel's canon filled the apartment. "Marry me." Janelle's breath caught. "Now what?" "Marry me," he repeated, still playing. "Not for Wilson, not for the company, not for any contract or arrangement or business deal." The music swelled beneath his hands. "Marry me because I love you, because this baby deserves parents who aren't afraid to show it, because I want to wake up every morning and see you stealing all the blankets. I do not steal." "You absolutely do," he grinned. "Marry me because you make me laugh, make me feel, make me human. Marry me because the thought of not being with you terrifies me more than any market crash or investor withdrawal ever could." Tears blurred her vision, but she managed to say, "That's quite a proposal strategy, Mr. Langston." "I did my research this time." His music shifted, weaving in themes from the Chopin nocturne that had started everything. Though I suspect my heart had the strategy planned long before my head caught up. Lucy's never going to let us live this down." "Is that a yes?" She kissed him then, soft and sure, while his hands never missed a note. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Contract be damned." The music soared, and outside the rain began to ease. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting rainbow shadows across the piano keys. Somewhere in the city, Wilson was probably already plotting his next move, and PR teams were crafting statements, and the market was responding to breakthrough drug trials. But in this moment, none of that mattered. There was only this: two hearts beating in time with the music, a baby growing beneath clasped hands, and love, real, messy, uncontractual love, writing its own terms in the spaces between the notes. "We should call Dr. Chen," Janelle murmured eventually. "I tell her she was right all along." "Tomorrow." Everett pulled her closer, his music turning tender. "But tonight, I just want to be here with you, breaking all the rules we never should have written." And so they stayed, while the piano sang of new beginnings, and the city below witnessed yet another love story it hadn't seen coming. One that had started with a contract, but would end with a promise far more binding, far more beautiful than any legal document could contain. Spring came early to New York that year. Cherry blossoms peppered Central Park with pink snow, and the city seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of new beginnings. In a private room at Mount Sinai Hospital, Janelle Thomas Langston gripped her husband's hand as another contraction peaked. "I take it back," she gasped. "All those times I said you were too controlling. I was wrong. Please control this. Make it stop." Everett pressed his forehead to hers, his usual composure cracking. "I would if I could. I'd take every second of pain. Less talking, more supporting," Lucy called from her spot by the window. She'd been timing contractions on her phone, occasionally sharing updates with the crowd gathered in the waiting room. Regina from the school, Dr. Chen, even Wilson, who'd shown up with flowers and a surprisingly genuine apology after the wedding. The wedding. It felt like yesterday and a lifetime ago. They'd kept it small, intimate, just family and close friends in the conservatory at Brooklyn Botanic Garden. Everett had played the piano instead of reciting traditional vows, his music saying everything words couldn't. Janelle had worn her mother's pendant and a dress that celebrated rather than hid her growing belly, and when they kissed, sealed not by contract but by choice, the applause had sounded like victory. Another contraction pulled her back to the present. "Doctor." Warner appeared, checking monitors with practiced efficiency. "Almost there," she announced. "Baby's in perfect position. One more big push should do it." Everett's hand tightened around Janelle's. "Remember to breathe, like we practiced. If you start playing imaginary piano on my arm again, I swear—" Her threat was cut off by the final contraction. The world narrowed to pressure and pain and purpose. And then music. Not from a piano this time, but from a tiny pair of lungs announcing their arrival with impressive volume. "Congratulations!" Dr. Warner beamed, placing their daughter on Janelle's chest. "She's perfect." And she was. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a head full of dark curls. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, were the exact shade of Everett's, though Lucy would later swear she had Janelle's determination in her tiny frown. "Hello, Grace," Everett whispered, touching her cheek with trembling fingers. They'd chosen the name together, its meaning holding all their hopes, for unexpected gifts, for second chances, for love that came disguised as business, but bloomed into something miraculous. "She's not in the contract," Janelle murmured, smiling through tears. "No!" He kissed them both, first his daughter's forehead, then his wife's lips. "She's something far better. She's our story." Hours later, when the excitement had calmed and Lucy had finally been convinced to go home, they sat together in the quiet hospital room. Grace slept peacefully in her bassinet while Everett played soft melodies on a tablet piano app. Not quite the same as his grand piano at home, but the sentiment remained. "What are you playing?" Janelle asked, drowsy but content. "Something new," he smiled, the smile that still made her heart skip even after all these months. "I'm calling it Grace's Theme. Though it might need some collaboration, I hear her mother has a decent musical background." "Decent?" She raised an eyebrow. "I seem to remember someone being very impressed by my piano knowledge that first day. I was impressed by everything about you that first day." His music shifted, weaving in themes from their history, the nocturne from their first meeting, the pachelbel from their proposal. "I just didn't know how to show it without violating about 15 contractual clauses. And now," he set the tablet aside and moved to sit on her bed, careful not to disturb her rest. "Oh, June, now I have a lifetime to show you. No contracts, no clauses, just us." Grace stirred in her sleep, making tiny sounds like preludes to dreams. Outside, the city hummed its eternal lullaby, while inside, a family found its rhythm in heartbeats and piano notes and love that had rewritten every rule. "Tell me again," Janelle said softly, nestling into his arms. "How we got here?" "Well," he began, his voice warm with memory, "it started with a contract and ended with a miracle," she finished. "Several miracles." He looked at their daughter, then back at his wife. Though I'm still not sure which was more miraculous, creating this perfect little person, or finding the courage to let you tear down every wall I'd built. Maybe they're the same miracle." Janelle touched her mother's pendant, imagining her smile, her wisdom, her faith in love's ability to find its way. Maybe sometimes the things we think we're choosing are actually choosing us. Grace sighed in her sleep, a sound like music. Everett hummed along, harmonizing with their daughter's dreams, and Janelle closed her eyes, remembering other moments that had led them here. A piano in an empty office, a nocturne in her sister's apartment, a dance at a gala, a night of fear that became a morning of truth, a proposal that threw away the rulebook, a wedding that celebrated not what they'd planned, but what they'd found instead. The contract that had started everything was still in Everett's office, filed away as a reminder of how the best-laid plans sometimes needed to fail for real happiness to grow. They'd framed the last page, though, the one with their signatures, now accompanied by Grace's tiny handprint in purple ink, a family document of a different kind. "I love you," Everett whispered, not for any camera or investor or public performance, but simply because it was true. "And I love you too," Janelle answered, not because any contract demanded it, but because her heart had written its own terms long ago, and in her bassinet, Grace Thomas Langston slept peacefully, dreaming perhaps of piano music and cherry blossoms, of contracts turned to love song, of walls becoming bridges, of two hearts that had found their way home through the most unexpected of arrangements. Outside, spring continued to paint the city in colors of renewal, while inside, a family that had begun with signatures and clauses celebrated the greatest contract of all, the unwritten one, the one that lived in touches and whispers and midnight lullabies, in shared dreams and shared love and shared life. A contract not of paper and ink, but of hearts that had finally learned to beat in perfect harmony. The end. At what moment in the story did you realize there was no turning back for Everett and Janelle? That their love was stronger than any contract? Was it when he played piano at Lucy's apartment? When he showed up barefoot at the hospital? Or when he chose Janelle and the baby over his own company? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment, every detail in the story has brought you emotions, thoughts, and maybe a little joy or motivation. Thank you for spending time with us, and hope that the next stories will continue to accompany you and touch your heart.